I'm Azani. I am based in Boston, but I'm from Texas, so happy Juneteenth. The mission of the Private Equity Stakeholder Project is to identify, engage, and connect stakeholders affected by private equity with the goal of engaging investors and empowering communities, working families, and others impacted by private equity investments. So, like Virginia asked, what is private equity? So private equity investments are different from publicly traded investments on the stock market. If a company is publicly traded, that means part or all of the company is owned by the public. So if I have $250, I can go buy a share of Microsoft, and technically I'll be an owner of Microsoft. Will my one share do anything? Probably not, but I'm technically still an owner. Private equity investments are not open to the public to invest. So investors in private equity are large institutional investors like pension funds, which Jordan will talk about, endowments, foundations, large organizations, and if you're rich enough, you can also invest in private equity. And so the model of private equity is to buy a company, try to extract as much profit as you can from it within like 5 to 7 years, and then hopefully sell it for a profit. So private equity firms will approach investors, so they'll approach your pension fund and say, hey, we're about to start buying a round of companies. Do you want to get in on this investment cycle? And the pension fund or the investor will give money. The private equity firm will collect all of the money and start buying companies. So say a private equity firm wants to buy a company for $100 million. They'll use $25 million approximately of their own money, and the other $75 million will be financed through debt. Now, the private equity firm is not responsible for this debt. The company itself is responsible for the debt. And so we see companies under a lot of distress, both from new management from the private equity firm that ends up being the new management of the company, and also this debt that they need to pay back immediately. And they're also paying the private equity firm management fees to manage the company itself. So companies are looking to cut costs so that they can pay back all of these things. And of course, when they look to cut costs, they immediately start with workers. So they will cut wages, they'll cut hours, they will close stores, engage in mass layoffs, all to cut costs at the cost of workers. And so because it's private equity, there's very, very little regulation. Of course, there's not a lot of regulation on the publicly traded stock market, but at least there's like a little bit more transparency. And because of the high levels of debt, private equity companies are more susceptible to bankruptcy. And so us at the Private Equity Stakeholder Project, we work a lot with workers who are employed by these private equity firms. Millions and millions of people are employed by private equity. Some of the big ones like Albertsons, PetSmart, 24-Hour Fitness, Hilton. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about the Toys R Us example. So as many of you know, Toys R Us was a huge department store, 30,000 employees, and when it filed for bankruptcy in 2017, many people said, oh, this is an effect of Amazon and e-commerce and physical stores not being able to keep up with demand. And of course that was part of it, but also Toys R Us was saddled with debt, $7.6 billion in debt, could not keep up and could not adapt to the times. So when it filed for bankruptcy in 2017, 30,000 workers lost their jobs without severance, without pay. The company was bankrupt, they could not pay. Of course, workers demanded their severance and were looking to private equity that did have the money and was ultimately responsible for Toys R Us going bankrupt. And workers were able to win a $20 million hardship fund, which is used as part of the money that they're owed for severance. Of course, they're owed way more. But winning $20 million from private equity just like shows the kind of power we can have and get wins for workers through targeting private equity. But we also want to engage investors themselves. So this cartoon says, don't sweat. The performance of private equity simply boils down to how you look at it. So of course, private equity is like, yes, we'll maximize returns, we'll give you so much money, blah, blah, blah. But there have been studies that have showed that investing in private equity is not much better than, financially than just investing in the stock market. So of course, it's not really worth it morally, but is it even worth it financially? And so a lot of our work is engaging pension funds around their investments in private equity, which Jordan will talk about.